Hi there Booktube, it's Eleanor here and it's time for my weekly wrap up of what I've read. This week, again, I'm not going to be doing a what I'm reading next week because I am taking part in the Rainbow Readathon and my TBR for that went up earlier in the week. So if you want to find out what I'll be reading next week, then you can check that out. The only 2 additions to that list I will talk about very briefly once I've talked about my Booktuber shout out and what I read this week. So the Booktuber that I'd like to shout out this week, she's relatively new to Booktube, but she's not new to reviewing books. She's got quite a well-established blog and her blog is called Book Chick City and her name is Carolyn Storer and that's also her Booktube channel and I will link her details down below. She's really lovely. She's reads different books to what I see often on Booktube actually. I think predominantly she reads a lot of sort of romance, more. When I say erotic fiction, I mean more sort of romance books. I know she reads quite a wide range and she's only got sort of maybe a handful of videos up yet, so I'm excited to see where she takes it. And some of her videos aren't all booktubey videos. She's using her channel as sort of a creative outlet, and so there might not just be book videos on there for the future, but she's done a June TBR and a few other videos. She did a really great bucket list video which I enjoyed, which isn't book related but it was really good and I thoroughly recommend you checking her out. She deserves way more subscribers than she's got and yeah, I really like her and she's helped me find a few different books and I might not have found had I not found her channel, so thank you to her for that. So I'll link her details below and check her out, and she is my Booktuber shout out for this week. So this week I read quite a lot of books, but 4 of them were in a series and I'm going to talk about them in a minute, but let me talk very briefly first about a book that I read which is the second in a series, which is The Infinite by Laurie M. Lee. Now if you've watched my channel you will know that I absolutely loved Gates of Thread and Stone, which was Laurie M. Lee's first book in this series. I thought it was great, a really good fantasy, a really strong first book. I really enjoyed this second book, but unfortunately not quite as much as the first. I wonder if it's got a bit of second book syndrome, I don't know, but I ended up giving this one 3 stars. I really liked it, you know, I liked the action, I liked the pace the story went at. I really felt that perhaps Kai, who's our main character, I didn't feel like she had as much integrity as she did in the first book. She just didn't seem quite as strong a character, and that's what I liked about her, and so that just sort of let it down a little bit for me. But I definitely recommend checking out this series. It's a really good series so far. You know, 3's a really good rating, but I'm definitely going to be waiting to see where the next one takes us. And so to the books that I read this week that I just couldn't put down. So I was doing a buddy read with a lovely girl called Michelle, or woman called Michelle, and we were doing it via email and we decided to read After by Anna Todd. I'd heard about this book, I'd heard people talk about it, say it's sort of erotic romance fiction, that there was a bad boy element, that people were going to compare it a little bit to 50 Shades in terms of the sort of relationship dynamic, that perhaps the relationship wasn't healthy. I'd heard, you know, people that had loved the series, and so I was really intrigued to pick it up for myself, and I just couldn't put this series down. I literally had to read one after the other, and they're not small books. So let me tell you first the basic sort of synopsis of the series without spoiling anything, and then I'll tell you a little bit about why I loved it so much. So basically this book is about a girl called Tessa, and she's just going to college. She's quite straight-laced, she's very organised, she's got a boyfriend called Noah. They haven't really done much, they've only just, you know, kissed and held hands, and she's had quite a bad childhood, some issues in her family life, and Noah's always been a support for her. She's going to the university that her mum wanted her to go to, and she's a hard worker, but you know, doesn't really do much. And then you've got Hardin, who is your generic sort of bad boy, doesn't really care about anyone, and I believe when this was written he was kind of based on Harry Styles from One Direction, but I have to admit I'm not a One Direction fan, or you know, their music's okay, but I'm not really into any sort of music that much that I would say, oh my god, I love them so much. And so I don't know much about Harry Styles, but That was the type of fiction it was written as. And it's just about them meeting and what happens from then on. And yeah, this first book, had the other books all been like the first book, it would have got a bit repetitive. There's a lot of sex in these books, so just be warned, there is a lot of sex in these books, and there is a lot of triggers for people of all sorts. There's triggers for rape, triggers for alcoholism, triggers for drugs, triggers for psychological abuse, triggers for physical abuse, triggers for anything you can think of. If you're struggling trigger wise, then don't read this, because there is a lot of triggers. So basically I gave this one 4 stars, and the reason I couldn't give it more was, for me, there's quite a lot of toing and froing in this book, and I don't want to talk a bit more, you know, because I don't want to spoil it for people, but there's quite a lot of toing and froing as goes on in these types of stories, and I was really worried that that was what was going to happen in the later books. But as always with these types of books, it left me on a cliffhanger, and so I moved very swiftly on the second book, which is After We Collided. This is an even bigger book, and this took us further on in the journey. Needless to say, I loved this one, and I gave it 4 stars. I then moved on to the biggest book in the series, which is After We Fell, and I really enjoyed this one, and I probably would have given it 5 stars, but I gave it 4. There was just something that was pulling me off of 5 for this one, but this is probably one of my favourite. And I have to say, I think the last 2 books in this series were my favourite. And then I moved on to the smallest book, which is the last one, which is After Ever Happy, and that one I gave 5 stars. I've made a few notes here of the sort of things that I liked about this. So the first is there is massive character progression. These characters, all of them, go on really, you know, personal discovery journeys, and they develop as characters and as people. They're not left the same people they were. They're not stupid kind of cliche changes. They actually develop, and you watch them develop before your eyes. They're not perfect still, you know, and they struggle all the way through the books, and you do see all of these elements coming together really nicely over, you know, a time period, which I really, really enjoyed. It's got a really exciting plot and a really steamy romance. I mean, really steamy, so those scenes are always good if you like a bit of steamy sex scenes. And there is a lot of sex in this, sometimes a little bit too much at parts, but actually it worked for the story and for the characters, so I really enjoyed that part of it. It dealt with a lot of issues, as I said, which may be triggers to people, but I really liked the way that they were done. They made sense to the story, they made sense to what was going on, and it didn't feel like any of it was forced. So yeah, I really, really enjoyed this. And if you're into sort of, I'm not sure if this is classed as new adult or adult, but into a contemporary romance, erotic fiction with some really good development of characters and some really interesting storylines and some really hard-hitting you know, themes, then I think you might like this. And you know, there were points in this where I was crying, and that doesn't, I mean, it happens sometimes. I am a bit of a wuss in some ways, but I really enjoyed this, and you know, I think it just was the right time for me and a really good series. So anyway, I'm going to stop gushing now because I really liked it. Can you tell? So yeah, so I read them this week. And then I tried to read The Luminaries by Eleanor Catton for a buddy read, and I got 150 pages in and I just had to DNF it. It just didn't work for me personally, and I don't know what it was. It just wasn't for me, and I can't put my finger quite on what it was. It just wasn't for me. The story wasn't for me, and the writing wasn't for me, and life's just too short, and I've got just too many books to persevere. So I'm really disappointed that I didn't like it, because I know so many people love it, but maybe it's just not the right type of book for me, or the right type of book for me at the moment, so I had to DNF that one. And then another disappointing book, unfortunately. I got 99 Days by Katie Cotugno out of the library, and I picked this up because I'd heard quite a few things about it. I'm really in the mood for sort of romance and contemporary at the moment. It must be the weather. And yeah, I was disappointed with this. It follows a girl called Molly, and it's over 99 days of the summer before she goes to college. This isn't a spoiler, but you know, the summer before, she cheated on her boyfriend with his brother, and it just follows like the repercussions of small town living and you know, her effects and coming back to town after going to boarding school for a year and what happens. And I liked the one thing I did like was it was set out in days, so we followed day 1, day 2, every chapter was a different day, and they were all sort of different lengths. They weren't huge chapter lengths. But I didn't like Molly, and I didn't like the person she was, and I didn't like where the story went, and I didn't like how she was with people, and I didn't like where the author took it with the brothers, and I didn't like anyone. I didn't feel anything for anyone. I didn't feel sympathy or empathy, or I wasn't rooting for any of the characters. Yeah, it just wasn't for me, unfortunately. And I've heard a few people have loved this and a few people haven't liked it, and it seems to be a mixed bag, but for me, unfortunately, I just didn't like it, and so I gave it 2 stars. So the book I'm currently reading is a buddy read with the lovely Dawn Kurtagich, and she's got a channel called Writaholic DK, and her first book, The Dead House, is due to come out soon, and I've done a review of that if you're interested, so definitely go and check that out. And we decided to buddy read together, and we're reading The Walls Around Us by Nova Rensuma. By the time you watch this, I probably will have finished reading this. I've not read too much of it so far, but I'm recording this a day or so early because I'm about to go on holiday. And yes, I'm loving it so far, and I'm excited to be buddy reading with her. We're using Voxer because now that I know how to use it, I'm totally addicted, and I love doing these voice messages because you can just get your thoughts down really quickly and the other person can hear what you're talking about, and yeah, I really like it. So thank you to Kitty G for sharing Voxer with me, because it's really changed my life. Well, it's changed my buddy reads anyway. I'm really enjoying it, so thank you. And so I'll let you know next week how I get on with this one. And the only other book that hasn't been mentioned in my Rainbow Readathon TBR that I will be reading is another buddy read with Tanya from List Obsessed Reader, and we're going to be reading Half Resurrection Blues by Daniel Jose Older together. This came in our Book Riot Quarterly box, and we decided we were going to give it a go together. I think it's kind of a paranormal romancy or paranormal type book. He's got a lot of books out, I believe, so if we like it, there's plenty there for us to pick from, so I'm excited to be reading that with her, and we're starting that on Friday, well, today. So yeah, that is my week, what I read, what I'm reading next week, and my Booktuber shout out of Carolyn Storer. Definitely check her out because she's brilliant. And what are you reading? Are you reading a lot? Are you reading anything particular? What type of genre are you leaning towards at the moment? Are you like me and the sunshine's making you want contemporaries, or do you just read? You know, I never would have said I'm a seasonal reader. It wasn't something that I ever thought, but actually as the sun has started to come out, I've really wanted contemporary romances. So I don't know if that's something that Booktube has done to me because I'm seeing a lot more of other people talk about contemporary romances, or whether it's just I've just decided that's what I fancy at the moment. But I'm really enjoying the books I'm reading. I'm feeling a little bit sad that After is over, and I'm looking for that next series. So yeah, let me know if you've read anything like that. I've got a couple of new adult romances to give a go, so I'm looking forward to trying those out. Anyway, that's it from me this week, and I look forward to speaking to you soon. Bye for now, Booktube.